Ladies and gentlemen, the Football Scoop podcast is back. We're here to talk week 11. I say there's a couple of monumental games and some other very interesting conference race type games. And I got a couple of college football experts, Zach Barnett, John Bryce, here to talk about them. Gentlemen, I believe we should start in the SEC. A couple of what I think are enormous games, college football playoff ramification games. We've got Georgia at Ole Miss and Alabama at LSU. Let's start in Oxford because that game's a little bit earlier in the day. We got to let LSU, Alabama marinate. That's just how that game plays. All right, Georgia goes to Oxford. Pretty confident I'm picking Lane Kiffin's team to spring an upset here. Talk to me, gentlemen. Tell me if I'm crazy.
I think you're crazy. I mean, you got to start with Georgia hasn't lost a game in 4 years, almost to the day, against a team other than Alabama. And this is an Ole Miss team that is very good at demolishing teams that it's better than or equal to, not so good against moving up a weight class. I just need to see it to believe it from Ole Miss. And as I wrote this week, I think this is the biggest game of Lane Kiffin's tenure at Ole Miss, and therefore the biggest game of his college coaching career. If they lose this game, they're done in the playoff. This season is a disappointment. They have underachieved, and he's never been more all in on a team and a season than he is on this year. I mean, they started number 6 in the preseason, and they'd be out of the top 20 with a loss. Ole Miss, I think they're number 16 right now, 15 or 16.
A loss to Georgia? But okay. All right.
They'd be 7-3 with a loss to Kentucky. That's not a good season. That's not good. I just haven't seen Ole Miss's their top 5 across the board in a lot of stuff. I just haven't seen that translate against the best of the best.
JB?
Yeah, so now I get to trot back out my favorite stat, among my favorite stats that I've discovered this year, and that is since Kirby Smart took over the Georgia Bulldogs prior to the 2016 season, he has not had a team lose 2 true road games in any year. Period, point blank, end of discussion. They've never lost 2 true road games in a single season. Under Kirby Smart, they already have the loss at Bama, which was a near miracle comeback victory, a game in which they rallied from seeming impossible deficit to take a fourth quarter lead before giving it back. And then the other point I would make is that typically Georgia teams have responded under Kirby Smart if they've allowed the creep of doubt to set in. There's a little creep of doubt setting in because of Florida playing the Bulldogs so competitively last week, even as Florida had to shuffle down to a third-string walk-on quarterback from Yale and still lined up to take a field goal lead deep into the second half of that contest. Georgia never could quite put the Gators completely away. And this is when Kirby's at his best, when he can tell his team the outside world doubts. And remember, it's just been 2 or 3 years that he somehow convinced his players that they were picked to lose 5 games, and they were preseason number 1, but he made his players believe they were supposed to lose 5 games, and they ran roughshod over college football because of all of those things. I think Vaught Hemingway will be the best it's ever been, ever, period, from any game under Hugh Freeze to Ed Orgeron to whomever. I think Vaught Hemingway will be absolutely elite this weekend. I just don't think it will matter. I think Georgia is the physically better team. I was trying to check the weather last minute. I know at one point, Scott, if it's rain, that further helps Georgia, in my opinion.
I can't even believe you mentioned Ed Orgeron in the conversation right there. Like those were the high years. No,
Halcyon days, baby. Tell them about it, JoJo.
So enormous game. 2:30. The Grove, like LSU, likes to marinate throughout the day. 2:30. It's going to rain most of the day in Oxford. Not like a big rain, but it's going to rain. Dampers things a little bit. So here's what I saw. I saw last week Pete Golding had his guys ready to go. The defense was playing big up front, pressuring the quarterback. And if they can do the same thing to Georgia's offensive line, pretty good. If they can do the same thing, Carson Beck has just kind of been lost. And I just kind of get the sense Lane recognizes that he can't waste this season. And I think the Rebels get this one. I'm sticking with the Rebels, boys. You have not convinced me to change my mind.
I don't want to. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Zach that it's the biggest game of Lane Kiffin's career. It's not even close. It's bigger than any game he ever coached in the NFL because they've almost spent more on this roster than some of his NFL rosters.
Again, you're falling into the Ole Miss trap there, Scott. Pete Golding had his guys ready to go against Arkansas. How Ole Miss performs against Arkansas in South Carolina, I guess not Kentucky, against the middle class does not translate to the upper class, the upper echelon of the SEC, the Alabamas and the Georgias. And that's not the greatest in the world. Vintage Alabama and Georgia are the best in the sport. So there's a lot of programs that do that. But a lot of people have convinced because Lane has Ole Miss winning 9-10 games a year that they're in that class, and they're not. And they haven't proven to be. They're the top of the middle class. They are not in the upper class of the SEC. And they have not proven that they can win these games. And Georgia, Carson Beck, you bring up a great point. He threw Florida into that game. The good and bad of that is that he's proven he doesn't get rattled. He can throw 3 interceptions and he's going to come back and that's not going to affect him. Whereas other college quarterbacks, that might lead to a spiral. He probably plays his best after his 3rd interception. So you're going to have to play all 60 minutes against Georgia, against a team that is so strong mentally and so strong physically when they are locked in. And this is going to be one of those games where they are locked in.
And if it's rainy, that might help Carson Beck throw fewer interceptions. It might be harder for anyone to hang on to the football in that regard. So, and I believe Tate Ratledge is getting closer and closer to being full strength as an anchor along that Georgia offensive line. Whereas I know Lane has some fun with the player availability, injury reports that he has to turn in to the SEC every week. But there were maybe 27 Ole Miss guys listed on the player availability report this week, and a number of those were key players. Walter Nolan and Prince Uliamane were expected back for this game this weekend, but not guaranteed back, just probable. So I think that's another development to watch, especially if it's a slick field and guys are dealing with ankle sprains along that defensive line. That to me is also an element that could bode well for Georgia.
I'm sticking with the Rebels, boys.
Good.
I respect that.
All right, for everybody who has been following along throughout the season, y'all know Zach's had a big lead in the picks. So, I mean, listen to Zach for sure.
Insurmountable.
Are there cracks in the dam? I don't know. Zach, you still feeling good?
Well, it's a 2-game lead going into this week. And now, in my mind, I'm starting this week with a 3-game lead. So.
Okay. All right. So a little bit later in the evening, I think we're a 6:30 local kick here in Baton Rouge. Not Nick Saban bringing those Roll Tiders into town. So 2014, I believe. I think it was 2014. I'm on the sideline, LSU, Alabama, here in Tiger Stadium. Lane Kiffin, I think, was on that staff. I think. I could be wrong, I think. Yeah. And there was a live tiger right there. I mean, right there where Alabama comes out onto the field. Mike the Tiger was right there. It was awesome. How I don't have a picture or a video of that, I don't know. I should have taken a picture or video of that. The state of Louisiana is just so dysfunctional. They're bringing a different tiger. It's from Florida, has no connection to LSU. Why? Who knows? It's just weird. Who cares? Will LSU beat Alabama? Gentlemen, give me what you got.
I will give you credit. 2 years ago, you called LSU upsetting Alabama in Death Valley in a primetime Saturday night game. And I think that was a better Alabama team that lost to Brian Kelly's first LSU team. I think
Daniels was on that team too.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. And I think the Taylor kid at tight end maybe had a key 2-point conversion or something late in that game.
I got a great video of it. I was standing right there. Great video.
That's exactly right. I think you're standing there maybe with your daughter.
I was.
Yeah, good memory over here. So because I remember that game, I think this is not as good of an Alabama team going into Death Valley. And no, the Tigers don't have Jaden Daniels at quarterback, but Garrett Nussmeier, we know, can push it down the field, and Alabama's secondary has looked mortal. It played well enough to beat Tennessee overall, but its secondary is what betrayed it last month in that loss at Knoxville. For all of those reasons, I haven't officially entered my picks, but I'm absolutely leaning LSU in what is another college football playoff elimination game. The wild card teams are falling by the wayside this weekend, boys.
I think I'm going to take Alabama, but it's a low confidence pick. LSU is 111th in the country in rushing. They ran for 108 yards combined against Ole Miss and A&M. This is the worst Alabama rush defense we've seen probably since before Nick Saban. I don't have the numbers. They're 65th in the country against the run. I still like I don't like LSU to run the ball consistently on Alabama. And you bring up a great point about the Alabama's leaky secondary. It's been that way all season long. But Garrett Nussmeier against Ole Miss and A&M, 47 of 101, 742 yards, which is pretty good on 47 completions, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. We saw the A&M game, the opposite of Carson Beck. Garrett Nussmeier melted down over the course of that second half, cost him the game. Playing at Kyle Field versus playing at home against Tiger Stadium, wildly different atmospheres, obviously. Jalen Milroe in SEC competition, 5 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He hasn't been the same player. I think these are flawed teams all the way around. I think their flaws could lead to a great game. I lean Alabama. I'm not confident in that. What I am confident in saying is that when Alabama plays at LSU at night, it's a top 5 college football atmosphere, and I'm very happy we get to experience it this year.
Was that 2014? Was that 2014 game, Scott, the one that went into overtime?
Where TJ Yeldon, LSU was controlling
absolutely.
the game, and then TJ Yeldon took it over.
Took it to the house. Yeah.
So
that little slip screen or screen.
So the lovely Jess Bryce and I were in attendance at that game because there was no game in Knoxville that weekend, and we road tripped down to Death Valley, reached out to some of our LSU contacts. So, Scott, we didn't know each other then, but I was on the field pregame as well for a really long time that night. So, small world.
I'm pretty confident that was the game right at kickoff. I kind of got stuck on the field at kickoff, and I was on Alabama's sideline, and Mark Ingram was standing next to me. Mark is a little bitty dude, but Alabama's offensive line came and lined up in front of us because they were kicking to that, and so they were just getting ready to go on the field. And I'm looking at these dudes, and I'm just in awe of the size of these guys. And I looked at Ingram, and Ingram could tell I was bewildered. Like, these dudes are unbelievable. He goes, "You should see the dudes in the league. These are babies." I was like, what? It's like they're all 330. They're 6'6", 330. Oh, goodness. Good talk.
That's a good anecdote.
I thought I liked Alabama in this game because I thought Milroe was going to run the ball himself, and LSU struggles with that for whatever reason. LSU's receivers aren't great this season. LSU's run game is in and out. I'm waffling on this one, gentlemen. I don't know. We'll have our picks. We'll have our picks in the next hour or so. Whew, it's a big one there. All right, moving right along. Miami, I think, is at Georgia Tech. Miami just keeps winning. Can Georgia Tech shock them? Is the quarterback back?
He's game time decision, I believe, is my understanding. Haynes King, a game time decision. But even if he's back, how many weeks has it been since he's played? I think that's significant. And because of that, I just think that Miami has too much firepower. The only way Georgia Tech can win this game is if the Jackets are able to lay on the Miami defensive line and just completely eat up clock. We saw Notre Dame last month in what was a big game. Georgia Tech's first without Haynes King. We saw Notre Dame, as the game wore on, sort of score with pretty good propensity against the Jackets, and they couldn't keep up. And I thought that Georgia Tech got fatigued in that game. I think that the only chance Georgia Tech has is to really lay on Miami early and keep the Hurricanes offense led by Cam Ward off the field.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, John. It would have to be the Florida State game blueprint, and the problem for Georgia Tech is that Miami's a lot better than Florida State, as are a lot of teams. I think we've seen this Miami team show that they're going to allow Georgia Tech to stick around close in the second half, but Miami's offense is very explosive and very consistent, and that's a deadly combination when you have a quarterback like they do. So I like the Canes.
I think Vegas believes this will be a close game. I think the last I saw the line was maybe around 8.5, something like that. It's a single-digit line, I believe, and so I think Vegas believes in the mortality of the Canes for sure. But I don't think that it happens this week.
You ever get punched in the face and like it takes you a few minutes to even respond? I gotta go back. I feel like a few minutes ago, Zach said something like Alabama at LSU Tiger Stadium night game is like top 5 college football, atmospheres. What else would you have? And please don't tell me an 11 a.m. State Fair, Red River. Come on, give me something real that's up there.
Okay, so my list is the Iron Bowl when it's at Auburn.
Oh, good one.
Michigan, Ohio State when it's at Michigan. And Red River. You're wrong.
And 11 a.m. kickoff in Dallas.
You've never been. Come to the game.
Right. I have not. I don't even
come to the game. You're all invited, and tell me I'm wrong. And then the other one, I've never been to this game, so I'm not speaking from experience, but Army Navy would have to be in there as well.
Oh heck yes, absolutely yes.
Army Navy. I agree on the Iron Bowl. We're robbed of ever getting Ohio State, Michigan at night. That drives me nuts. So I think that that game cannot surpass Bama LSU because it's never played at night. I can't remember when it's been played at night. I can't remember when it's not been a noon or at the very latest a 3:30 game. But I'm really surprised that neither of you gentlemen said Vanderbilt, Kentucky.
Another game that, and this is a compliment to Alabama. Alabama at Tennessee, as we've seen these last 2 years, is incredible aesthetics.
Texas going into Kyle Field at the end of this season should be that should be a banger. That'd be fun.
No, that great bad omission on my part, but yes.
We still love you. All right, where are we going next? How about Florida, Texas? Does that excite anybody?
I think it's going to be compelling to see how everyone associated with the Florida program plays, both in the wake of the DJ Lagway injury and in the aftermath of the news that Billy Napier is safe for another year. Do they play free because of that? Or is there just an inevitable letdown from the pressures of this season in general, especially going on the road to a Texas team that I believe was open last weekend? I'm interested in this game because I think Florida has shown really nice competitive character over the course of this season. I think you can only contend that the Gators quit in week 1 against Miami, which is inexcusable, but since then have shown a lot of fortitude. But I think this may be a game where Texas, coming off of an open week in much physically better condition than the Gators, may make it look like the Gators quit by the time the fourth quarter winds down.
Yeah, if DJ Lagway was healthy, this would be, I think, a more likely a fourth quarter game. But I don't think he's going to play. And the Warner kid, his strengths don't match up well with the Texas secondary, which is one of the most underrated units in college football. I can't believe we're having this conversation with a veteran offensive line and a veteran quarterback. But if Texas can get back to good in pass protection and allow Ewers to play confidently and play fundamentally sound football, Texas should jump on Florida early and handle this one comfortably. But should and will are different things.
Also, South Carolina hosting Clemson at night with the Cockabooses going and the Sandstorm playing. That's a great atmosphere as I jump topics here. I just want to get that in there.
JB, just about a minute ago, said, Napier coming back for 2025, which is absolutely the expectation and all that stuff. But can we just go back to Scott Strickland just releasing a statement that doesn't say he'll be back in 2025. It just says he will continue as our coach. What are we doing here, Scott? Like, come on.
No, that's a good point. I mean, why would you release that if you're not bringing it back for next year? Like, was there any question he was going to be? Were people thinking he was going to be fired today? But at the same time, yeah, why not include 2025? It doesn't.
Well, somebody
why invite this conversation that we're having right now if this is your intent?
Somebody with greater perspective and insight in the SEC than all three of us combined would be Nick Saban. And I'm still have it fresh in my mind where either late September or early October, Nick Saban on ESPN Game Day absolutely lambasted the Florida leadership. And so starting all the way at the top and certainly to include Scott Strickland. So you can't be really surprised at a nebulous or vague statement because what's going to make Florida suddenly stand up and have the temerity to issue a great statement.
Temerity, great word.
Temerity, solid. Okay, so we talked about great environments. I'll give you another one, and it's happening. BYU, Utah, Holy War. That's a big one. And honestly, you look at Utah's schedule, they got nothing after this. I mean, I think they're Colorado, but I mean, this is what they're playing for right here, right now.
The Holy War, baby. I was in Provo last week. We'll have a feature coming on one of the BYU coaches whose units are having a splendid year. We'll have that feature up before kickoff, if not later this afternoon. But there's already a lot of buzz. Last weekend, both teams were off. There were a number of Big 12 teams off last weekend. Colorado among them, BYU, Utah. BYU is playing with tremendous confidence right now. They're getting really good play on their defensive line. Tyler Batty is really doing some big time stuff for them. We know that Utah is emptying everything into this. This game had gone away for a few years. Now it's back, that they're both back in the Big 12. That might be my favorite element of the revived Big 12 is that we now get the resumption of the Holy War. It's going to be an electric game. Rice-Eccles Stadium will be rocking. Utah has literally nothing to play for except to try and win this game in a season gone horribly into the depths of Salt Lake. BYU doesn't want to lose this game, but none of its goals and dreams are really railroaded if the Cougars lose this game. They still can be a playoff team if they lose this game.
It's a great point. You bring up a great argument to make me question my BYU pick. BYU has not won in Salt Lake since 2006. So as a big guy, mental aspect of football, that jumps out to me. At the same time, the vast majority of those games, BYU had the inferior team to a Utah program that was among the most consistent in college football. I would say there is upset possibility, but I just think BYU is such a better team than Utah. I've been a guy that's believed in Kyle Whittingham, Morgan Scalley, that defense. They'll have enough to figure it out. They've proven me wrong too many times these past two seasons without Cam Rising. So I'm going to take Utah. Excuse me. I'm going to take BYU to beat Utah. I just think BYU is a better team.
I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I've got this little buzzer thing that's in those chairs at work. So I'm going to hit it if you guys over a minute on each of these. We're going short, quick hits. Give me thoughts. Start with Army is at North Texas. North Texas doesn't stop the run particularly well. Army quarterback, I think it's a game time call, I think. Army's going to keep rolling?
No,
Yeah,
I'm incredibly worried about the Black Knights. The Vegas trends, if you buy into those, are trending a North Texas upset. The line has shrunk closer and closer to being a straight up pick 'em, and I'm concerned about Bryson Daly's health. So I have Army on the biggest upset alert of the weekend.
See, I've just seen North Texas just get absolutely pulverized on the ground against competent rushing offenses, and I believe Army's competent even if Bryson Daly doesn't play. North Texas is really good offensively, obviously throwing the football with Chandler Morris, but I'm sticking with Army until North Texas proves to me they can stop the run.
Okay. Colorado's at Texas Tech.
Shootout. Take the over. I don't know what it is, but that's how I see this game. I think it will be highly entertaining. It was interesting to hear Coach Prime earlier this week talk about his respect and admiration for Joey McGuire from their time coaching in the high school ranks in the state of Texas, and McGuire having dealt with his son, Deion Sanders Jr., or Bucky, as he's referred to. So this is one of my more intriguing, lower profile games of the weekend.
Yeah, huge game for Joey McGuire and Texas Tech. I mean, he's had all the 110% buy-in from the Texas Tech community, from the money behind the program. And now, as we get to the end of year 3, it's like, all right, we need to see that come to fruition. We want some big skins on the wall and break out of the Texas Tech mold of we win 7 or 8 games a year and lose most of the games that matter. It's time to go out and get a big win. At home, the Fox crew is going to be at this game. It's not the big noon game, but the big noon people will be there. This is a Taj Brooks game for me. I don't want to play a shootout if I'm Texas Tech. I lean on my all-conference running back. I think he needs to touch the ball 30 times for Texas Tech to win this game.
Okay, that'd be a fun one. All right, I got no feel on this one at all. I don't know how to pick this one. Oklahoma's at Missouri.
Oklahoma. They played really good. They played better football. They played organized football. They've been playing a game plan that makes sense for their talent and everything. They've straightened things out enough that I think they're going to go on the road and pull a mile upset to beat an overrated Missouri team.
I like the Tigers at home. I know Vegas actually favors the Sooners. It's a late kickoff at Faroe Field. I just think Missouri and Drink and Brady Cook find a way to get in. I've got to double check and make sure Brady Cook is healthy and available.
I think he's game time. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they're hopeful or something like that.
Yeah, even if Brady Cook plays, I think Jackson Arnold's better.
They can't win if Drew Pine is their quarterback. Missouri cannot win if Drew Pine is their quarterback against Oklahoma. Period. Point blank. End of discussion.
Joe John was calling plays against Maine, right?
Yeah. He was, but he was calling playing against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is better than Missouri. They looked like they had an idea, they had a clue offensively in that game against Ole Miss, and the Ole Miss D-line took that game over. But that gives me more confidence in Oklahoma in this game than the Maine game.
Okay, all right. Washington goes to Happy Valley, Penn State. How do we see that one playing out?
I think Penn State lumbers through a close win, maybe a 20-13 type contest. I think that there has to be lingering disappointment throughout Unhappy Valley this week. Washington comes in on a mild up note after beating USC 26-21. I think Penn State's vastly overrated. I don't think Washington is all that good, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this be a fourth quarter game.
I completely agree. It's a night game. It's the whiteout game. Penn State's record in whiteout games is like 13-8. That's another overrated thing about that program. I think it'll be a flat atmosphere, flat team. This is a game where you kind of prefer to be on the road after losing, your Super Bowl type game at home. Unfortunately / fortunately, they're at home. I think I completely agree with John's outlook on this game.
All right, Michigan's going to Indiana. I like Indiana by 2 or 3 touchdowns personally.
Yeah, so does Vegas. It's a 14.5 point line, I think, or that's how it opened. Largest that Indiana, I believe, has ever been favored against Michigan in the history of odds. But we have no reason not to think that Indiana won't continue taking care of business. Rourke getting closer and closer to 100%. All their hopes and dreams in front of them. Michigan just playing out the string.
Yeah, Indiana has beaten Michigan, I think, twice since 1967. So it doesn't matter the spread, the records. They're going to have Indiana's full attention and respect. We were all waiting for the Indiana letdown game. We thought we'd saw it, or it appeared It peaked out of the clouds when they fell behind 10-0 at Michigan State last week, and then Indiana scored the final 47 points. I don't see a letdown. I see a full focus Indiana team that maybe it's not a blowout, but 31-17, something like that is what I expect.
I want to put a little respect on John Bryce's name. Initially, I mocked his bold prediction. I was like, conference champion? Whatever. Okay. I didn't realize how bad Kansas was. So, respect. You went bold. It was a bad team. And you're like, well, they're going to win conference champion. Okay. So, Kansas has a chance to get their second win over an FBS team as they host Iowa State. And I actually kind of think they might shock Iowa State. Iowa State's coming off a tough week. Kansas playing better. JB, how you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I think that, look, Iowa State is one of the nice stories this year in college football, but they're not an elite football team. And they've skirted disaster a few times before, finally having it catch up to them last week against Texas Tech. You make a great point that this is much like Utah hosting BYU this weekend, Kansas can play the role of further ultimate spoiler and pretty much seal the Big 12 as only a one-bid conference in this initial 12-team playoff.
Yeah, I don't think that's insane at all. The Big 12, the charm and the fatal flaw of the Big 12 in this era is that the ceiling and the floor are closer by far in this conference than any other league. So the Big 12 put out a graphic where something like 14 teams were still in the championship race, including Utah. So the 15th team in the standings beating the second team in the standings, plus or minus wherever they actually are, this is not shocking in the Big 12 as it would be in the SEC or the Big 10.
JB, Florida State's coming to Notre Dame. Does anybody in America watch this one?
Well, it's prime time on NBC, so it will get some eyeballs just because of that. But no, it's not a compelling game. It's not a compelling matchup. I anticipate significant changes to the assistant coaching staff at Florida State at the end of this season. Here's my favorite stat of maybe the season. Florida State has not scored 20 points in the United States this college football season.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
And here's the bad thing when you're awful as a program like Florida State. When you're awful as Kansas, people overlook you. When you're Florida State and you're bad, no one overlooks you because beating Florida State means something even when they're 1-8.
Correct.
All right. I got
Florida
two more kind of.
All I wanted to say.
Interesting games. Go ahead.
Yeah, all I was going to say was that Florida State's only time to score 21 points was in Ireland to open the season. That was all the way back on August 24th, and they still lost that game.
So two more games I want to talk about. South Carolina is at Vanderbilt. Give me some thoughts on that one, gentlemen. Is this a letdown for South Carolina?
I don't think so. Diego Pavia is banged up. I think that's significant, and I think that we've talked all year. This is a South Carolina team that's close to being in CFP contention because of the way it squandered that LSU game and didn't close out that Alabama game. But I can't get it out of my head that they were good enough when Kentucky still had all of its bluster early in the season to go into the big shopping cart at Kroger Field and run the buggy into the wall. So I think South Carolina will get it done.
Yeah, I originally had Vanderbilt typed out in our picks and then deleted it and typed in South Carolina. This is a top 20 team nationally. At worst, I think South Carolina is when they're healthy. And, I mean, the combination of Sellers and Sanders in the backfield is just tough to bring down over 60 minutes. And Vanderbilt's really good when they can get you in their type of game. Diego Pavia needs to be fully healthy and fully operational for them to do that. I like South Carolina.
From what I've seen, when there's a dominant defensive line against Vanderbilt just can't get anything going. And that's what South Carolina has the potential to do. Unfortunately, there's been some history with South Carolina's teams not showing up every now and then. So I think South Carolina wins the game. I think they show up. I'm just a little worried. We'll see. I think Duke is a good football team. NC State was a disaster to start the season. I feel like Dave Doran's kind of got his team kind of figured out. And I like NC State to beat Duke in this game. I'm looking for your thoughts on that one, gentlemen.
Game's at NC State, I believe, correct?
I think
thought
so.
I saw that. Yeah, and I just think that back-to-back road games for Duke, as much as Duke invested last week at Miami, I tend to agree with you. I think these are the games that we almost never see Dave Doran lose. They're among the biggest disappointments in college football this year. They were outclassed right from the get-go against Tennessee, and their season just spiraled after that. But they tend to play a little bit better in November, and at home, I like the Pack.
Yeah, Duke is lit outside of what we saw against Miami last week. Duke's limited offensively, and I think Manny Diaz has gotten the most out of his team, but I think there's a limit on what they can do. And NC State's overall talent base, I believe, is higher, and if they play to that, they'll win the game.
All right, I got one more for you, then I'm going to open up the floor. I have believed all along Ashton Genty's going to win the Heisman. I kind of feel like Ashton's got to have another monster breakout game. He can't just have, 140, 160. Nothing wrong with that, but he needs a monster breakout. Nevada is way better than people realize, but they've lost a couple of late. I think he needs a breakout, and hopefully we see it this week.
Yeah, I think Jeff Choate. Jeff Choate is a really good defensive coach. I think that Nevada will be schemed up to force everyone not named Ashton Genty to beat them this week. So if Genty has a Herculean game like you're referencing, Scott, I think it should carry even more weight because I really think that I have a lot of respect for Choate, and I really think they'll do everything in their power, the Pack will, to take him away.
Yeah, he's kind of become like college football's Barry Bonds in that opposing teams would rather walk in a run than pitch to him. And that it's such a difficult hill to climb for him to win the Heisman. And the fact that he's gotten this far is a testament to him. But I agree. I think Jeff Choate would rather give up 300 passing yards than 200 rushing yards in this game.
And the quarterback can do 300 easily.
Yeah,
I mean, they're good. They got good receivers, tight ends, fantastic. And Genty doesn't get thrown to very often, but every now and then, he had a couple great catches in the last two games. So anyway, good talk. All right, gentlemen, the floor is yours. What other games you want to talk about?
Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was deferring to you. I'm intrigued by West Virginia, Cincinnati. That's an underrated rivalry. Not a lot of fondness between those two teams. And Scott Satterfield has fairly quietly done one of the better coaching jobs this year in the Big 12 to have the Bearcats at 5-3. They should be 6-2 minimum. They just absolutely squandered that early season game against Pitt, where the Bearcats were up 17 plus points, I think, in that contest. And there's mounting pressure on Neil Brown and the West Virginia coaching staff. This game's at Cincinnati. It's a very compelling game for me this weekend because of on field and because of what's percolating off the field.
I'll keep an eye on Arkansas State, Louisiana. That's not a championship game. The winner of that game doesn't have they have games to win ahead of them, but they'll be firmly in pole position if they win. Particularly Louisiana, they'd be 5-0 in conference play. They're at home. The Sun Belt doesn't appear to have a dominant team as it's had in years past. It's a great top to bottom conference. That's one it's on ESPN Plus, so it'll be tough to actually watch, but one to keep an eye on.
Bonus pick for me would be Clemson at Virginia Tech. Two teams disappointed by last week. Two teams overall disappointing this year. They were supposed to be two of the four top teams, two of the really top three teams in the ACC. Now neither of those programs controls its destiny, but I still think the crowd in Blacksburg will have a little something for Dabo and the Tigers on Saturday night.
All right, I'm going to close this out. Big shout-out Tim Beck. Yesterday, Thursday night ball, Myrtle Beach, Conway just inside Myrtle Beach. It's Myrtle. App State was there. App State, went through that whole hurricane thing. App State's angry, mean. Tim Beck, with all the ESPN cameras and personalities, He throws a beer back, chugs it like a boss. Dan Mullen took a sip and put his down. Matt Berry's like, I'm going to be a company guy and not even take the sip. Beck crushed that thing, goes out, beats the tar out of App State. Then he's out there handing out pizzas to all the students after the game. He's dancing. What a night for Tim Beck. That was big for those guys.
Yep.
That's the greatest of college football. God's favorite sport.
That is what Coastal Carolina was perfectly on brand. I loved it. All right, we're the Football Scoop staff. We're out. Y'all have a great weekend. Let's enjoy the games. Tiger Stadium on a Saturday night. You're going to smell it in midfield.